I spent years helping my dad run his business. Then he gave it to my cousin and said, "Family comes first," so I opened my own next door. At first I brushed it off. Ethan was clumsy. He constantly miscounted items, gave incorrect change, and once accidentally ordered 300 hammers instead of 30. I'd fix the mistakes quietly, not wanting to make him look bad in front of Dad. He was still learning, I told myself. We've all been there, right? But slowly, I began noticing things that didn't sit right with me. Customers started asking him questions, not me. My dad started referring to the store's operations as something he and Ethan were figuring out. One day, I overheard him saying to a vendor on the phone, "Ethan's really taking the reins now. Got a good business head on his shoulders." I stood there frozen. I was the one who renegotiated our supplier contracts and brought our costs down by 15%. I was the one who worked late every Friday, inventorying stock and building spreadsheets from scratch. Ethan? He showed up late half the time and spent the rest of the shift flirting with customers or taking smoke breaks that lasted 40 minutes. Still, I didn't say anything. Because what do you do when the person you confront is your father? Instead, I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was tired, overthinking, jealous even. Maybe I just needed a break. But deep down I could feel it. That shift. That invisible line where your instincts whisper, "Something is wrong here." And if you don't listen, it gets louder and uglier. Things escalated one afternoon when Dad called a family meeting in the break room. It was just the three of us, and Ethan was already there when I walked in, sipping from my coffee mug like he owned the place. My dad has that serious look he only used when someone died or taxes were due. He said he was thinking long term and wanted to solidify the store's future. I nodded, assuming he was about to hand over some responsibilities to me officially, maybe even start paperwork to transfer ownership. Instead, he said, "I've decided to bring Ethan in as co-manager." I blinked. I thought I'd misheard. "Co-manager?" I asked. "Since when?" Dad said it was in the works for a while, that Ethan had shown real potential. And then he said something that made my blood turn to ice. "It's time you started thinking about your own path, too." My own path? This was my path. For 12 years, I gave up weekends, holidays, even dates, all for this business, for our family legacy. And now, I was being nudged out like some temporary intern who overstayed his welcome. Ethan didn't even hide the smug smile on his face. I didn't argue. Not then. I just nodded, got up, and walked out to the loading dock. I remember sitting there on a stack of mulch bags, staring out at the street, hands trembling. Everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, was being handed to someone who'd barely worked a full year in his life. And yet, this was just the beginning. Hi, I'm Kyle, 31 years old, and until recently, I thought I knew what family loyalty meant. I've spent the last 12 years of my life building something I thought Bov Imoyim. I didn't go to college, didn't take a gap year, didn't do a backpacking trip through Europe like my friends. Instead, right after high school, I started helping my dad with his small hardware store, Dawson Supply, a local spot that's been in our family for generations. My grandfather ran it before my dad, and naturally, I assumed one day I would take over. At first, I was just stacking shelves, sweeping, learning the basics, but over time, I became the one opening and closing. I was doing inventory, setting up vendor accounts, updating our outdated systems, bringing in new product lines. I even designed our first website and set up online ordering during the pandemic, which pretty much saved our business. And through all this, I never asked for a salary, just enough money to pay for my rent, food, and gas. My dad always said, "One day this will all be yours." And I believed him. That sentence was enough to keep me going for over a decade. Then came Ethan, my cousin, a guy who'd show up for Christmas drunk, never kept a job for longer than 6 months, and once crashed my car and ghosted me for a year. Yeah, that Ethan. About a year ago, he moved back into town fresh out of yet another business venture that flopped. Suddenly he wanted to reconnect with family and learn the trade. I didn't think much of it, figured it was a phase. But my dad? Oh, he welcomed him like the prodigal son, gave him shifts at the store, let him shadow me. I thought it was temporary. I even trained him on the register, showed him how we order tools, how we work with contractors. Because family helps family, right? Turns out I was being played. But I wouldn't realize that until it was far too late. After that so-called promotion of Ethan, something inside me changed. Not in a loud, explosive way. There was no shouting, no thrown tools, no slammed doors. It was quieter than that, more dangerous, like a hairline fracture that spreads through the foundation of a house, silently until the whole thing collapses. I kept showing up to work, doing what I always did, stocking shelves, talking to vendors, fixing Ethan's messes. I didn't let on that anything had changed, but inside, I'd stopped feeling like I was part of the family business. I felt like a hired hand, a temporary placeholder in something that was supposed to be mine. That quiet resentment, it didn't fade. It fed on every little interaction. Like the time Ethan asked me to fetch him coffee on your way in, like I was some kind of assistant. Or when Dad praised him at dinner for stepping up while I sat there, fork frozen midair. Or when I suggested updating our point of sale system and Dad said, "Let Ethan handle the tech stuff. He's younger." But younger, not smarter, not more experienced, just younger. And then came the numbers. I handled the bookkeeping. Always had. One late night, while reconciling our monthly sales, I noticed some entries that didn't make sense. Huge inventory orders that we didn't receive. Cash sales that didn't add up. At first, I thought I'd made a mistake, but after double-checking the logs, I realized what was happening. Ethan was skimming. Not a lot, just enough to stay under the radar. But it was there, clear as day. Either Dad didn't notice, or he didn't want to. I printed out the pages and brought them home thinking I'd confront him the next day. But I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the late nights I spent sweeping up after closing, all the times I patched leaks in the backroom roof, all the holidays I missed so Dad could visit his sister while I ran the register. And now I was supposed to protect a cousin who was stealing from us? That's when the decision started forming, slowly, like fog lifting off a field at dawn. If Dad didn't care about loyalty, why should I? If family comes first meant I got last place, then maybe it was time to stop playing by their rules. I didn't tell anyone, not at first. I started small, talking to some of the vendors I had personal relationships with, asking quiet questions about small business loans, real estate, permits. Then I took a few personal days, claiming I had medical appointments. In reality, I was scoping out a storefront 2 blocks down. It was an old hardware space that had been empty for a year. Dusty, neglected, but solid. Good bones, better parking. Right off the main street with a garage door out back for easy deliveries. And it was cheap. Too cheap, really. The landlord told me the previous tenant had gone bankrupt. I didn't blink. I just nodded and asked where to sign. The day I put down the deposit, I stood alone in the middle of the empty shop. It was quiet, echoey. Sunlight came through the dusty windows in thick yellow lines. My heart was pounding and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pride. Not borrowed. Not given out of pity or family obligation. Real, earned, stubborn as hell pride. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell Ethan. Not yet. Because when I did, it wouldn't be a conversation. It would be war. Not because it was hard. I'd always been good with my hands. I could wire shelves, install lighting, repaint walls in my sleep. No, what made it brutal was how quiet it all had to be. Every coat of paint I rolled on, every shipment I arranged, every moment I spent in that empty store instead of Dad's, it all felt like betrayal. But then, I'd look at the bank statement and see the money Ethan was still draining from our family's business, and the guilt would dissolve like sugar in hot coffee. He wasn't protecting the family, he was bleeding it dry, so I kept working. The space started to transform. Slowly at first, just cleaned up shelves and some fresh paint. But then came the signs. A new POS system, digital displays, local product deals. I talked to nearby contractors, electricians, even small landscaping companies who were sick of being overcharged at my dad's place. I promised fair prices, fast service, and honesty, and they listened. By the end of the second month, I was ready. The day the sign went up, Hawthorne Hardware, was the first time I felt like I was breathing freely in a long time. I didn't name it after myself. I didn't need to. I knew what it stood for. The next morning, I opened the doors at 9 a.m. sharp. No big banner, no balloons, just a new start. The first customer who walked in was Mr. Kellerman, a retired electrician who'd been shopping at Dad's for decades. He looked around, nodded slowly, and said, "Took you long enough." By noon, I'd already made more in sales than I expected for a full week. But it didn't take long for the other shoe to drop. That afternoon, I got a text from my mom, just a simple, "Your father wants to talk." I hadn't even told her about the store. Turns out I didn't have to. Someone else had. I don't know if it was a customer, a supplier, or one of Ethan's friends scrolling Instagram who saw our grand opening post. But the news traveled fast, faster than I was ready for. I showed up to the house that evening expecting a storm. I got silence. Dad was sitting at the dining table, arms crossed, a glass of bourbon in front of him. Ethan stood in the corner, arms folded like a sulking teenager. My mom paced behind them, anxious energy rolling off her in waves. I stood in the doorway, not saying anything. I didn't need to. Dad finally broke the silence. He asked me how long I'd been planning it. I told him the truth, a few months. He asked why I didn't tell him. I answered with a question of my own. Why he gave the store to Ethan without talking to me. He didn't like that. He said things I'd expected. That I was ungrateful. That I was dividing the family. That I'd never understand what it meant to really be loyal. And Ethan, God, Ethan had the nerve to act like he was the one betrayed. He said I was trying to destroy the family legacy and stealing customers out of spite. That was the moment something in me snapped. I laid it all out. The skimming, the fake orders, the forged signatures. I had receipts, bank statements, inventory lists. I've been saving them for weeks. And my dad? He didn't believe me, or maybe he just didn't want to. He said I was lying, that I made it all up to justify my betrayal, that Ethan would never do that. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so pathetic how deep denial can run when blood's involved. I left without another word. But here's the thing. I thought I'd feel broken after that. I thought walking away from my family would leave me hollow, bitter, full of regret. Instead, I slept better that night than I had in years. The next morning, I opened my shop like usual. I helped a woman pick out tools for her first DIY project. I gave a retired contractor a discount he hadn't asked for. I got coffee from the bakery next door and shared it with my delivery driver. And I felt, whole. Not vindicated, not triumphant, just me, free. The weeks that followed were a blur, in the best way possible. Hawthorne Hardware took off faster than I ever imagined. Word spread like wildfire, not just about the new store, but about the way I ran it. People appreciated that I actually remembered their names, that I'd helped them load bags of soil into their trucks, that I gave honest advice, even when it meant not making a sale. And the contractors? They came in droves. Apparently, years of being overcharged, ignored, and guilt-tripped my father's shop had left a sour taste in more than just my mouth. Once they saw I was serious, once they realized I was offering real value, not revenge, they jumped ship without a second thought. It wasn't just business. It felt like I was healing something. In them, in me. Meanwhile, across the street, my dad's store started looking hollow. Not empty, exactly, but slower. Less energy, less joy. I'd see Ethan standing behind the counter sometimes, staring across the parking lot at my store like it offended him by existing. He never came in. Not once. Neither did my father. I heard bits and pieces from customers that Ethan had tried to match my prices and failed, that suppliers started demanding upfront payment, that some of the old crew had left quietly and come knocking at my door. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. Okay, maybe I smiled a little, but mostly I stayed busy. I stayed focused. Then, about 2 months after opening, something unexpected happened. My mom came to visit. She didn't call ahead. She just walked in one afternoon while I was helping an elderly man with plumbing parts. She stood there awkwardly near the register until I finished, then asked if we could talk outside. She looked tired, older, not in the physical sense, but emotionally, like the weight of keeping peace between two stubborn men had finally taken its toll. She didn't apologize, not directly, but she told me she missed me, that the house was too quiet, that my dad still refused to talk about the store, that Ethan was struggling. I didn't say much, just listened. At one point she asked, "Do you think this is repairable?" And I told her the truth. "I don't know, Mom, but I'm not the one who broke it." She nodded, wiped her eyes, and left with a bag of gardening gloves and a new set of shears. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a step. Since then, things have only improved. Financially, I'm doing better than I ever did working under my dad. Emotionally, I feel 10 years lighter. I wake up every day with purpose, not anger, not obligation, but purpose. The community's embraced me in ways I didn't expect. I've been invited to local business panels, asked to sponsor events, even got approached by a nearby high school to speak about entrepreneurship. Ironic, really. I spent years working for a man who never once called me a partner. Now people call me a mentor. If you're still reading this, and you're in a situation like mine, here's what I'll say. Loyalty doesn't mean self-sacrifice. Family doesn't mean submission. Love isn't silence. Sometimes you have to walk away to see clearly. And sometimes you have to build something new to remind yourself that you matter. Update. 1 year later. I didn't expect this, hey Reddit. I honestly didn't think I'd be writing another update to this post. I thought I closed that chapter a long time ago. But the thing about life is, it keeps surprising you. So here we are. 1 year since I opened my store across the street from the place where I spent over a decade of my life building someone else's dream. A year since my dad gave everything, not just the business, but his approval, his legacy, to my cousin Ethan, and told me family comes first, like I wasn't standing right there, like I hadn't been family the whole damn time. And a year since I stopped waiting for his validation and started living my own truth. Let's start with the business. Hawthorne Hardware is thriving. That's not a humble brag. That's just the truth. We're profitable. We've expanded inventory twice. I hired 2 more full-time staff and gave my first employee, Kyle, a raise and partial management responsibility. He cried in the stockroom when I told him, said no one had ever believed in him before. I think I get that now. What it feels like when someone finally sees you. I started a monthly Help Your Neighbor event, free workshops, tool sharing, basic home repair classes for single parents and the elderly. At first, it was 10 people and a busted projector. Last month, we had over 100 attendees and local press coverage. It's more than a store now. It's part of the community. Funny how that works, right? When you stop trying to prove your worth to people who don't value it, you start building something that matters to people who actually do. My family, that's more complicated. My mom still visits. Not often, but enough to remind me that she's trying. She comes by with a thermos of coffee and asks about the store, the staff, sometimes even me. She doesn't talk much about my dad, and I don't ask. We both know the wound is still there. No point ripping it open just to confirm it hasn't healed. As for Ethan, he's still running my dad's shop. From what I hear, things aren't going great. A few longtime contractors have stopped going there entirely. Suppliers have been less patient. The reputation my dad built is slowly slipping away, and Ethan doesn't seem to know how to stop it. He came into my store once, not to say anything, just to look around. He stood near the entrance for maybe 30 seconds, then walked out. I think he expected to find me gloating. Instead, he saw a business that runs on kindness, respect, and actual service. He probably didn't recognize it. And my father? Still radio silence. I passed him on the street a few months ago. He looked older, not just physically, but heavy. Like pride had turned into regret, but he didn't know how to carry it. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. I wish I could say it didn't bother me, that I've let go completely. But that'd be a lie. There's still a part of me, a stupid, hopeful part, that wishes he'd walk into my store one day, look around, and finally say, "I'm proud of you." But maybe that's not the point anymore. Maybe the point is, I don't need to hear it to believe it. To everyone who followed this story, I just want to say thank you. Sincerely. The messages, the encouragement, even the tough truths, all of it mattered. More than you know. Some of you called me out on things I didn't want to admit to myself. Others shared similar experiences that helped me feel less alone. And a few of you just said, "You've got this." And that was enough on some of the hardest days. Thank you for listening.